All right. For better or worse, I am live again, and chances are probably none of you are seeing me. I certainly apologize for this. It became absolutely impossible for me to do anything without using my QR. So in any event, I had to shut off the live stream. I'm very sorry, guys, but I see that you're logging on anyway, so maybe all this craziness created some interest. Who knows? So in any event, bear with me for just one moment now that everything is working. Okay, now if you could please, those of you who are on Discord, if you can, on the questions and answers portion, tell me whether or not you're able to hear me, first of all. Let's do a mic check. And by the way, I'm going to go a little bit longer because I've created so much inconvenience for you folks. I apologize. Okay, great. I appreciate it, folks. This whole thing, because I've had to reboot it, it's going through virus scans and everything else that I don't want it to do. Its computers absolutely refuse to cooperate in any regard. So, in any event, and me not being technically adept does not help, but I'm glad that you can at least hear me. So, the least I can do is at least let you folks know what the topic is for today. And I'm sure that some of you may have been able to guess because we were unable to get a vote, at least a deciding vote. There was only one vote difference between the topic last time, and that is, have we already detected signs of alien life or alien civilizations? This is something that's a bit off topic from what I usually do, but nevertheless, I released a video on it. It caused all kinds of issues, all kinds of debate. A lot of people called me a conspiracy nut, that sort of thing. First of all, I want to be 100% clear that this is not a topic to where I'm talking about the government concealing the truth from us about alien civilizations. I don't believe that. I also don't believe that the scientific community is intentionally involved in some kind of cover up. Nor is this really a conversation about UFOs, even though we have had some recent information from the Department of Defense that seems to indicate that we might be under observation by something extraterrestrial in nature. This is a little too soon for us to be messing with at this point. And I keep looking back at my computer because it continues to try to virus scan on me, which is most annoying. But in any event, I'll fight my way through it. So now that I've brought this up, there are a few things that I want to point out. Is the fact that, as I mentioned this in my video, that there are quite a lot of tangible things that have been observed, both from an astronomical standpoint and also in terms of the information that have been sent back from our probes, that strongly indicate that we have already detected alien life. And there are a number of extremely prominent scientists, scientists who are not part of what's regarded as the crackpot community or anything along those lines, folks who find themselves highly respected on a variety of different papers and such that have nothing to do with alien life. And, nevertheless, these folks believe that that the scientific community is taking an altogether incorrect view of alien life and alien civilizations, and that we're setting the bar entirely too high. So all that having been said, let's go ahead and get the conversation started. And I know this was a mystery topic, and perhaps you guys weren't terribly ready for it. But let's go ahead and get started with the basic alien life side of things. Which of you folks believe it, first of all, and do you have any questions in regard to it? And do you have any statements to make in regards to this? And we certainly have folks who are able to do this, so I'd be very interested in hearing that. And it's the folks who are on our Discord server who are contributing. I don't know how many of you are out there because of all the crazy technical difficulties. Once again, I'm sorry about this. But in any event, let's go ahead and get some statements made about this. Oh, and while we're waiting, I am wearing my first piece of merch. Have a look. Target Mars 2024. Kind of hard to see it given the way it's handled, but in any event, that was a surprise that I had for today. So, do we have any comments or any questions to be made about this first? And I know that folks are probably logging back on and trying desperately to get back to the questions and answers. But I know Tom and Johnny are currently online, and perhaps you may disagree with my point of view here. But in any event, as I'm waiting for any comments or questions about this issue, and once again, I brought it up kind of at the last second. First of all, we can talk about the WOW signal from 1977. This is something that has yet to bring any natural explanations to the fore, in spite of the fact that it's been around forever. There's still to this day on NBC and other major media sources report that this was an incorrectly identified comet. And that's what created the WOW signal. For those of you who are not familiar, this is an extremely strong radio signal that we received in 1977, right at the hydrogen line, which is the most common frequency that we would expect aliens to send transmissions to us, because hydrogen being the universal substance, obviously the most common substance in the universe, this is what we expected. This was exactly what we thought would happen if, another civilization were to reach out to us. And yet, as I say, as recently as a few years ago, the media has reported that it was just a comet or perhaps a group of comets. This was debunked a very, very long time ago. If comets could produce these narrow transmissions on the hydrogen line. First of all, comets don't create those sorts of transmissions. And if they did to that kind of strength, we would have detected this a long time ago, and we would have detected it over and over again, given how common comets are. And yet still, the media continues to bring this forward as an explanation for the WOW signal. And this has been debunked for decades, and yet it still keeps cropping up, along with a number of other ideas like microwaves, for example. People saying that there is a microwave running in SETI's office, and that's what it was. Well, if that was the case, then we would have gotten this signal every time the microwave got turned on. So in any event, it's been debunked for a long time that there's been any sort of accepted natural explanation for the WOW signal. And it remains one of the most compelling extraterrestrial signals that we've received. And I call it extraterrestrial because it's exactly what we expected to receive from another civilization, aside from the fact that it did not repeat. That is the only thing that it didn't do to measure up to SETI's requirements. However, the signals that we've sent out from the Arecibo telescope also do not repeat. So as a result, if any alien civilization were to pick up any signals from us, and if they're as narrow-minded as we are, they would regard this as being our wow signal. And to me, I find this rather absurd. I find that they're setting the bar entirely too high. You had worked, well, I think you've guessed at this point that we're talking about alien life and perhaps alien civilizations. Johnny Spacer says transpermia is possible, but we need to do more research. Yeah, I would say, Johnny, and of course, you know, as you can tell, I tend to have a pretty biased view on this, but nevertheless, given the bacteria that I described in my most recent video, that is capable of surviving in vacuum, capable of surviving radiation levels of insane amounts of intensity, capable of surviving intense cold, the cold of space, actually. There are a number of different, very few, but a number of different bacteria along these lines. And evolution tends to not to explain these types of bacteria. It's a case of evolutionary overkill. At no point in Earth's history, at least since life has existed on this planet, have we ever had to have, or rather, has there ever been a need from an evolutionary standpoint to have that kind of radiation resistance, or for that matter, to survive in vacuum? And yet, there is a bacteria, at least one, that's capable of doing this. And so it has been put forward that transpermia, that is to say, life being carried by a meteorite from Mars to Earth, is the source of that particular bacteria. It's a very compelling argument. And evolution, which, you know, is our, you know, dominant theory for how life came into being, tends not to explain it, except for the fact that it came from some place where radiation was far more intense, namely Mars, or perhaps even a comet or outer space. So in any event, Tom, yes, Viking Mars lander found very good evidence of life. And this was when the Viking lander introduced a number of consumables essentially into the Martian soil, including oxygen and other elements, which ended up being consumed by something in the soil. And then when the soil was heated subsequently, not as much of the elements that we are introducing into the soil were consumed, exactly as we would expect if something were alive. The only thing that that debunked at the time the notion that we had discovered life way back in the 70s with the Viking expedition was the fact that we didn't detect organic matter with the Viking instruments. But remember, these were 1970s instruments. And later on, the Opportunity rover did discover these molecules, these organic molecules, in the Martian soil and atmosphere. And so that was covered. And if the Viking landers had discovered all of that at the time, I would say that they probably would have announced the existence of life then. But since they didn't at the time, but you know, the question I ask is, because they discovered them at different times, why does that make a difference? And it's, by the way, the Viking landers aren't the only evidence that we have. The high presence of methane, high presence of oxygen. There are so many things in the Martian atmosphere that so far is very difficult to explain with natural processes, and also the fact that there's so much CO2 instead of carbon monoxide. Dr. Levin, who was in charge of the experiments to detect life on the Viking landers, he discovered, or rather points out, that the high bombardment of cosmic rays should have converted the atmosphere into carbon monoxide unless something was creating CO2. And lo and behold, we have a CO2 atmosphere without a whole lot of causes for it. By the way, This is also the case with Venus. Because Venus does not have a magnetic field, it too is under tremendous bombardment from cosmic rays and has been for a very long time. Plus, it's closer to the sun, so it receives enormous bombardment of radiation from the sun, which should have created a lot of carbon monoxide then as well. And guess what? We have CO2 on both planets. Gravity waves as a form of communication, says Johnny Spacer. Yes, that has also been pointed out by Dr. Loeb at Harvard. He also talks about gravity waves as a form of transportation, as evidence of a type of propulsion that might be used by other civilizations. But this is also something that's been put forward. And by the way, Dr. Loeb happens to talk a lot about extraterrestrial civilizations, but again, this doesn't mean that the guy is a crackpot who happened to get himself a job at Harvard University. This guy gets on a lot of highly respected papers about a lot of different subjects when it comes to astronomy and astrobiology that has nothing to do with life in space, and yet he's still highly respected. So, when we talk about Dr. Loeb and many of his theories, we don't need to dismiss him simply because he tends to be, his team seems to have more of a bias towards the idea of there being life in the cosmos aside from us. All right, Juhid, do you think NASA and other research leads should lower their criteria for accepting extraterrestrial life in any form? They seem to have far higher criteria for non-Earth life than most of the scientific community has for anything else. Here's kind of, Juhid, to answer your question, I'm almost there, but not quite. What I would say is the scientific community should be more open to saying that given how many things that we found that could have extraterrestrial civilizations as an explanation, that the evidence for there being at least something out there seems to be pretty compelling, as opposed to saying that it's the last possible explanation under any circumstances, with extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, as is always said. Well, is it not equally extraordinary that there's nothing out there? That there are no other civilizations? Where's the proof in that? Where's the demand for extraordinary proof of that sort of claim? It doesn't seem to be a requirement at all. The moment we come up with any kind of natural explanation for any sort of phenomena, boom, it's instantly accepted. Why? Why is a natural explanation accepted rather than put under the microscope? I find that to be a strangely biased way of looking at things. And it starts to stretch, in my opinion, what is scientific. We come to many conclusions about observed effects of things and then take that as, on essentially on faith that it's the truth. For example, the wobble in stars that we used to see before we could actually identify exoplanets. It was very commonly accepted in those days that meant that there was a planetary system in place when we saw that wobble. Didn't see the planet. All we saw was its effect, but that was sufficient. Why is the same standard not held up to the phenomena that we see that indicate the presence of extraterrestrial life? Microbe says Johnny Spacer could hibernate on comets and asteroids and fall to Earth on cometary dust. Yes, very true. As a matter of fact, that's a theory that's been around for a very long time, since the days of the Andromeda strain, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with, where life being carried on comets or meteors in microbial form get picked up by a satellite designed to retrieve samples and bring them back to Earth, and then starts killing people en masse, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why Dr. Levin really doesn't want samples returned from Mars. And honestly, I think it's a little dangerous too, before we actually send humans to Mars, or at least something alive, to see if there is something alive, what effect it might have. FTL, no basalt questions today. Cool. Well, in any event, could there be basalt-based life on Mars? Wow. Well, I've heard of silicon-based life, methanogenic life, basalt-based life. Very interesting. Well, I mean, the whole concept of silicon-based life, excuse me, has been talked about extensively. That silicon could act as a perfect replacement for carbon. So yeah, carbon-based life, basalt-based life, or silicon-based life. That would be quite the discovery. I'm going to talk a little bit about methanogenic life on Titan. That's something that I'm going to try to do that time permitting, but that's very compelling as well. Okay. Ooh, Alien Zookeeper is here. Good. Thank you very much. Juan Lawson, a new member, I think. I don't think I've ever seen you before. So we could not be sure of the conditions on a comet or an asteroid's journey and the radiation levels therein. Maybe only the microbial life that was hardy enough survived. Yes, that's entirely true. And so therefore but still, when we're talking about transpermia, it's something that came from outside, whether it rode here on a comet or an asteroid, or if it came from Mars, regardless, it's a type of life that did not originate here. Tom asked a question, what about the evidence of extraterrestrials from ancient human civilizations? I tend to be biased on this one. And I simply say that I think ancient human civilizations were capable of quite a lot of things that we don't give them credit for. The notion that they had to have aliens helping them. There's, the Ancient Aliens or whatever show. I have to admit, I've watched a couple of those episodes, but still, for me anyway, I don't think that some of the astounding things, say like the Incas did, for example, where they were able to put together these magnificent buildings without the use of mortar or anything, but simply have these bricks, or rather the stones, fit together seamlessly without even being able to put a sheet of paper in between. It's amazing stuff, amazing. But once again, I think we need to give credit to these ancient engineers, that is to say, human engineers. Does that mean that it's impossible? No, no. Certainly aliens might have visited us in the past, and influenced our development. But that's one thing that I'm not as convinced about. I don't think that the evidence is as strong. But that's just a personal. And yeah, you can't prove a negative, says Johnny Spacer. Yep, that is an issue. But what we can do is we can form conclusions based on what we observe. And if we observe enough phenomena that don't seem to have natural explanations, but seem to have very plausible extraterrestrial explanations, at some point the evidence really starts to mount up and you really start to wonder, are we being fair here? Are we being even-handed in our scientific approach to this particular discipline? I really don't know. As a matter of fact, well, my opinion. I do know. I think that we're being unnecessarily biased against the evidence of extraterrestrial life, at least simple life. I do believe that if we sent humans to Mars today, they scooped up soil and put it under the microscope, they would find something fairly quickly. I'm pretty convinced of that, given the fact that the Viking landers discovered the same information at two locations separated by 4,000 kilometers between the two sites. And I think I'm right there with my conclusions. or rather estimates in terms of distance, they found the same results. To me, that indicates that life is not only there, but it's abundant. Okay, FTL, have I seen the three towers on Google Mars in terms of age and origin? Once again, in terms of any artifacts on the Martian surface, perhaps built by alien civilizations, once again, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't think we have any smoking guns there. I do believe that it's a compelling reason because I believe that extraterrestrial civilizations do exist. I think it's a compelling reason for us to go to the moon and Mars and explore them in depth with humans. Because I do believe that at some point in our past, alien civilizations might have visited us. And if they did, where is the most likely place for us to find evidence of their visit? Well, places where things tend not to change very much because of erosion and because of tectonic plates. And that would be the moon and that would be Mars. So my opinion is are there any artifacts? And I'm familiar with this three towers you're talking about. It looks kind of compelling, but once again, it's from orbit. We need to see it up close and personal before we come to any conclusions on that. Now, if it was generating some kind of energy or something along those lines, if spectrographically we could pick up, something, if it was active, that would be one thing, but obviously it's not. Okay. We have somebody by the name of Gunkeltron. I'm sure I've never seen you on here. One thing that pisses me off about the search for alien life on Mars, the planetary protectionists who demand that we must delay human landings on Mars for X more decades until our lame probes. This is great. You talk the way I do, with non-definitive experiments finally definitively prove whether or not there is life on Mars. I could not agree with you more. And the reason that I could not agree with you more is if there is life on Mars, bacterial life, I do believe that anything that we introduce into the equation is going to be killed by Mars very, very quickly. Between the perchlorates, which has been proven to kill the vast majority of bacteria on this planet within minutes of exposure to the atmosphere, to the cold, to the radiation, to everything else, I think that almost anything that we introduce to this planet is going to be killed by that planet in almost no time at all. If anything, I think that human life or any life that we bring to Mars is going to be in deep trouble from the Martian life that it would happen to encounter, simply because we are talking of bacteria that can survive extreme cold, almost no atmosphere, perchlorates, and radiation. That's tough. If that life exists, it's incredibly tough. And there's no reason for us to avoid exploring the planet, especially if we're careful about it, and trying to find this extraordinarily tough and unique life. There's just too much to be gained for us to have a hands-off policy. So yes, I am totally in your camp on that one. Okay, alien zookeeper. I am fairly confident that there is simple life on Mars and elsewhere. Whether it's danger to us, I don't know. No sentient life forms or technical civilization anywhere else in the system. I agree with you there. Perhaps there's evidence somewhere of them visiting us. That is a possibility. There is also the possibility there's something something called a self-replicating probe. This concept was come up with, rather postulated decades ago, that to explore the civilization, or rather to explore the galaxy, you would send out these probes that would make duplicates of themselves and continue to expand. And using these probes, you could explore every system in the galaxy in the space of a couple of million years, which is a very short amount of time compared to how old the galaxy is. So there could be a probe like this hiding in the solar system, keeping us under observation. If there was, finding it would, a needle in a haystack would be child's play by comparison. So if it's there, unless it chooses to communicate with us, we're not going to know that it is there. But that's the only way that, in my opinion, that there would be any intelligent life. Okay, Johnny Spacer, strong evidence of intelligent extraterrestrial life would cause social unrest throughout the world, kind of like today. Ancient civilizations were capable of great imagination. I agree, Johnny Spacer, especially when using psychedelic mushrooms. Oh dear, did I just create problems on the channel? I don't know, but in any event, yes, I do think that it would create some unrest, but it would create a great deal of excitement as well. And regardless of how much unrest that it might create, I do think that the scientific community is not going to be involved in any kind of conspiracy to hush it up. I just don't. I think that there's entirely too many of them to keep that kind of a secret. I think instead, it would it would shake a lot of things, a lot of religious beliefs, a lot of other stuff. People could become afraid once they discover that there's something else out there. Do they mean us harm? That sort of thing. Yeah, yeah, especially those who believe they've been abducted by extraterrestrials, and then to have those theories confirmed, that sort of thing. Yeah, it would create a lot of issues. Okay, Juan Lawson. It should become plainly obvious to even a first-year student biologist equipped with a microscope as to whether or not life exists on Mars. We need to get scientists there as soon as we can safely. I agree with you completely. We could have done this decades ago with our existing technology. Werner von Braun had a very clear plan on how to do it, and yet we didn't. Instead, Nixon cut the funding to the space program, and then we know what came next, the space shuttle, and our strange focus on low Earth orbit rather than trying to explore the solar system, and that's been going on for half a century. Not to say that our robots haven't discovered amazing things and that those robots haven't been amazing feats of engineering that have outperformed what everybody thought they could. But nevertheless, robots can only do so much. And yeah, we definitely need to get humans there. Johnny Spacer, Elon's rush to send thousands of colonists to Mars could end in disaster from Martian microbes. However, he'd still risk it. Maybe, yes, and I would risk it as well, to be honest. But yes, it is possible. What happens if we encounter a microbe that takes a while, hibernates in a host for some time before it finally goes active? Excuse me, my throat gets dry very quickly. So yeah, that's something that could represent a serious threat to future Martian colonists. However, I'm willing to take the risk, and I'm pretty sure that anybody else who would go would be willing to take the risk. And is that to say that we shouldn't take extensive precautions? Well, absolutely, we should. We should take as many precautions as we possibly can. The Apollo astronauts stayed in quarantine for a very long time, just in case there are any lunar microbes that came back with them. So the first astronauts that go on the first successful journey to Mars, similar quarantines need to be in place. So in any event, we've got Juan Lawson making another contribution. It's great. We got new people jumping on board here, and am very happy. Oh, Johnny Spacer added, "Have spacesuit will travel." Yes, indeed. I totally agree. So, one thing I wanted to mention while we got more questions coming in, methanogenic life, life on Titan in 2005. And once again, I wish I had more of my information in front of me, but trying to correct these details, these technical problems led me to have to desperately try to do that instead of get my information. But nevertheless, methanogenic life, the type of life that would breathe in, use methane, I apologize, as a catalyst for its method of breathing. In 2005, a couple of researchers postulated what would be found in terms of the presence or rather lack of acetylene on Titan, and the presence of other chemicals. Also, breathing hydrogen, I apologize. Breathing hydrogen is something methanogenic life would do. So the lack of both acetylene and hydrogen at the low levels of Titan's atmosphere, if there's something in the seas or rather the lakes of Titan that's breathing this stuff and creating this kind of byproduct, they made predictions in this regard. And I ask you to look this up for 2005 Titan life, and you will find evidence about this. They made certain predictions, and these predictions were confirmed in 2010 when we took actual readings of the Titan atmosphere and determined that everything that they predicted for the existence of methanogenic life was confirmed, and seems to strongly indicate the presence of something like that, which would be absolutely amazing. Something that breathes and subsists that way, rather than the type of life that we're used to, would be so fundamentally different in so many ways. We could learn so much. It's astonishing. And yet, once all of their information was confirmed, what they said is that most probably this is being caused by a natural process that we don't know what it is, because at the temperature that Titan's surface is at, all of the natural processes that would have created the phenomena that we're observing wouldn't apply. So we don't know what natural process could possibly be doing this. But nevertheless, that is far more likely than the existence of life, which would be, if I'm quoting them directly, but I believe I'm paraphrasing it, to be far more remarkable and far more unlikely. Why? Why? To me, once again, this is a case of scientific bias. Why is a natural process that we have no idea what it is, that we can't explain, but we'll come up with it eventually, certainly, as opposed to the existence of life, which does completely explain all of the phenomena that we're observing on Titan? Why is this being regarded as completely unlikely as opposed to a natural process that we haven't discovered? It just seems absurd, and to me it seems unscientific. Okay, I've been ranting here, and I might have fallen behind. So in any event, no, just I haven't fallen that far behind. Juan Lawson, unfortunately, risk-taking runs hand in hand with exploration. Given the opportunity, I would love to at least get a ride into low Earth orbit, lottery numbers willing. Yes, I'm pretty certain that once the Crew Dragon is taking up space tourists, that Elon Musk will probably throw a lottery out there. So that would be a fantastic thing, wouldn't it? 5 days is what he has planned for a Crew Dragon trip. That would be something else. Bob and Doug about to, okay, yes, thank you very much, Johnny Space. There's re-entry in case for those of you keeping up with it. Splashdown has not occurred yet, but the re-entry is about to begin. So Bob and Doug are about to confront the inferno of re-entry. However, the state of the heat shield on the Crew Dragon is solid, as near as we can tell. It's been extensively checked, so there's every reason to believe that this is going to be successful, but all our best to these two brave astronauts who are about to change everything for the future of manned spaceflight, at least in low Earth orbit, with the successful crewed test of the Crew Dragon, and all the best to them. So once that splashdown occurs, that's going to be something quite amazing. So I hope all of you folks didn't go running off, but in any event, do we have anything else to contribute, guys? We have different people, by the way, online than are usually online. So I'd be very, oh, there's a question from Juhid. Do you think Europa's ocean could contain life more advanced than microbiological? Absolutely. Absolutely, I believe that. There is no reason why Europa's oceans should not contain something that advanced, unless microbial life just very, very seldom advances beyond that point. But I tend to think that that's not the case. There are very, very strong indications for the existence of life on Europa. We have seen the staining on the cracks, the brownish staining on the cracks of Europa, which are being produced by something from beneath, seems to be our best assumption. And our spectrographic analyses of the staining on these cracks almost completely matches a number of different types of bacteria. And where there's abundant types of bacteria, there could also be more advanced life. But once again, are we going to know this until we drill through Europa's surface and put a mini sub down there or something along those lines? No, we're not. And even the upcoming Europa Clipper mission is not is not going to be able to do that. So once again, hopefully Europa Clipper will at least pick up enough evidence for us to say definitively if there's life of some kind at Europa. But yes, there's very compelling reasons to believe that there's more advanced life at Europa. They certainly had the time. They've had the protection from the radiation because of the thickness of the ice that exists on Europa, and there's the evidence of heating from within and the presence of salt. All of these things would suggest abundant types of microbial life, which on our planet led to the development of more advanced life. Something intelligent? No, probably not. Something living beneath the water, well, it would have a very tough time of evolving into something intelligent. But nevertheless, yes, I do believe that there could be something like Europa space whales or something along those lines. Although sadly, I don't think I'm going to live to see anything like that. But it's nice to at least believe that. Okay. Could it be oxygen breathing, or does it need to? It would need to have gills of some kind for something like that to breach. Well, I guess it depends on the nature of the ocean beneath. If there is a gap between the ice and the water, some sort of breathable atmosphere, then perhaps there could be something that could breach and breathe air, similar to a whale, but that's kind of pushing it a bit. I would think that something with gills would be more likely. Okay, Johnny Spacer, getting to the surface of Europa will be very difficult due to the ragged ice, high radiation environment, let alone a thick layer of ice to drill through. Europa Clipper could pick up evidence by flying through steam vents, which were recently discovered. True, Johnny Spacer. We can at least determine whether or not there's microbial life. And you're right, it would be incredibly difficult, although I would say not impossible. The rate, because of the way that the moons orbit Jupiter, the levels of radiation on Europa vary widely. There are areas of Europa that don't have these like instant kill levels of radiation compared to other areas of Europa. It's for this reason also actually that the nearby volcanic moon of Io would not be evenly depositing sulfur across the entire planet. Because of the way that the moons orbit Jupiter. So, and once again, feel free to look this up. There are areas of Europa where the radiation might not be as problematic. However, you are right. The ice and the nature of it could make things quite dangerous. Perhaps some sort of robotic lander similar to the ones that we've put down on nearby asteroids, that sort of thing. If the Japanese were able to do a sample retrieval from an asteroid and all the difficulties that represented and bring it back, I'd say that drilling through the surface of Europa might be doable. But once again, this is only to determine whether or not there's something larger than microbial life down there. So in any event, it's a long way in the future. But Europa Clipper, you're right, Johnny Spacer, is going to determine a lot. And I'm very excited about that mission. Excuse me. Yes, Juan Lawson points out that hot ocean vents on Earth prove that life can exist without light. Very true. It's a fairly common thing, actually, in the depths of the ocean, where there is no light to be found at all. There are many types, many species of life that thrive down there in spite of the pressure, in spite of the lack of light. They still survive. So life finds a way, if I may quote Jurassic Park or paraphrase them or whatever. But yeah, I'd be willing to bet $1,000 that there's life on Europa. And believe me, $1,000 is not easy for me to come by, but I'd be willing to put $1,000 on there being life in the oceans of Europa. Okay. Yes, Tom points out Europa would be my first choice in looking for any kind of life, just going on the fact that much more life exists in our oceans than on land. And ice could protect you from your radiation on Europa. Yes, Tom, that's true. Very true. Okay, Johnny Spacer, thanks for being such an active contributor. I think life on Europa would breathe gases from volcanic vents. Why not? I mean, if we can have methanogenic life that can breathe hydrogen, there's strong evidence of that. Why not? I think we're being entirely too narrow-minded about what life might be capable of and what kinds of life might thrive, not only in our solar system, but in others. And once again, I go back to scientific bias. I think that we need to broaden our perspective a little bit. And by the way, to go quickly back to the whole extraterrestrial, the SETI, search for life, as many of you know, SETI has been a privately funded thing for a while. The government gave up on SETI a long time ago. Also, there is almost no activity in terms of what's called active SETI. That is to say, us sending out signals, whether they be radio or laser communications of some kind, trying to communicate out. Of course, then again, there are those who say that perhaps that's not such a great idea, and perhaps other civilizations might not wish us well. That's an active dispute, but in any event, we have done very little, inexcusably little, to try to find extraterrestrial civilizations. Very little radio astronomy. And by the way, with all the interference that we get from the other radio sources on this planet, it makes it even more difficult. Putting a radio telescope on the far side of the moon would do worlds of difference. And also in terms of the areas of the sky that we've studied, we've only really barely scratched the surface and studied just a tiny amount of the sky when it comes to trying to find unusual phenomena and possibly extraterrestrial phenomena. And yet we have seen many things that we can't explain with natural explanations, at least not yet. Many things. And this is the tiny amount of area that we've explored already. What happens when we explore the whole damn sky, right? What are we going to come up with then? Well, we'll find out at some point once we get our more advanced space telescopes up there, but we have yet to get to that point. Gunkeltron, yes, my understanding is that life was anaerobic until photosynthetic life produced an abundance of oxygen. That is our current theory, yes. Excuse me. However, once again, it's once again, our understanding of life is based entirely on what we have here, because that's all we have to go on, right? And yet, even with what we have to go on here, the evidence for the existence of extraterrestrial life seems quite powerful, quite powerful. Johnny Spacer is not a fan of active SETI. Is that because you don't like the idea of attracting the attention of other civilizations? Just curious, Johnny Spacer, and take your time in responding to that. That would be the most logical reason, in my opinion. But in any event, here's another question from Guy MF4 or whatever. Um, Okay, given how long it took to happen here, and given smaller and cooler, they'd probably operate on a on a slower timeline. Well, that's entirely possible. Yeah, that's entirely possible. Given the fact, however, that hundreds of millions of years ago we had advanced life on this planet, even if they are operating on a slower timeline, we could have some sort of aquatic dinosaurs or something similar to that on Europa. Even if they were a couple 100 million years behind the times. Invite the alien predators down for lunch, says Gunkeltron. At least we'll know whether we're alone while they're chowing down on us. Yes, it could be the most exciting and final experience of our existence. And by the way, that also is said commonly by Elon Musk about artificial intelligence, but I don't want to get into that discussion. That's a hotly debated thing too. Okay, we have more comments coming in. This is great. And once again, I'm sorry for the technical issues that we've had. This has been a good discussion so far. Extraterrestrial intelligence is a big hypothetical unknown. Best tread carefully. You have a very good point, Johnny Spacer, and I'm kind of in between on this issue. But yeah, we reach out. Now, of course, a lot of people argue, why would an advanced civilization be interested in us? I mean, what does Earth really have? I mean, we don't have that much, right? All of the resources on this planet are available just about any place else. So, and you wouldn't have to fight anybody to get it, especially nobody with nuclear weapons. So why would you invade this planet in the first place? Well, perhaps for one reason, because they're interested in slaves or something along those lines. That is one scary possibility. Another possibility is a machine civilization. This has been talked about a lot. Some people say that the ultimate development of all civilizations, if they don't destroy themselves, is to become a machine civilization. And what would a machine civilization think of us? Just raw materials? It's hard to say. So yeah, active SETI could be a very, very dangerous thing to engage in. And perhaps passively listening is a better idea. Okay. All right, we have more people we got 3 different people typing in. So in any event, once again, thank you for tuning in. If you want to contribute to this or future episodes, you can check the description of just about any of my videos, and you can learn how to become a Patreon and subscriber for as little as 75 cents per live stream. By the way, it's $3 a month is the lowest level you can participate in this. Okay, Juan Lawson, given the fact that we have only been transmitting radio waves for just over a century, alien civilizations might not have even received those transmissions yet. That's true. That's very true. And a lot of our transmissions have been entirely too weak to be picked up. The whole contact scenario where the aliens pick up transmissions from the Olympics, where Hitler presided over those Olympics. That's actually incorrect. Those transmissions would be entirely too weak to reach other stellar systems. You need something a whole lot stronger. Something like the WOW signal, by the way, that was incredibly powerful. And again, right at the hydrogen line, something that we would definitely expect if somebody was trying to say hello. So in any event, yeah, but there have been a number of transmissions that we have sent out. And also, we did a radar scan of the entire asteroid belt at one point in our history. That was incredibly strong and would be detectable by alien civilizations, assuming they were 30, 40 light years away. I forget when we actually did that radar scan. But once again, we only did it once, didn't we? So if an alien civilization picks it up and then it doesn't repeat, they're going to look upon it as their wow signal and ignore it. Or if they're not as narrow-minded as us, they might come to investigate who sent out that powerful bunch of radar. Hard to say. But they would have to be very close, yes, to pick us up at all. Otherwise, they would just in fact, even if they did spectrographic analyses of our atmosphere, they wouldn't detect our presence until the Industrial Revolution. So it'd have to be a civilization that's fairly close. What about aggressively expansionist civilizations? Maybe they don't want our resources, but they just want our real estate. Well, there's an awful lot of real estate in the galaxy. Perhaps they're interested in our planet because of the fact that it's located in the Goldilocks zone. Yeah, that could be a possibility. And aggressively expansionist civilizations are a very scary possibility. One would hope that something that's that aggressive would also have destroyed themselves when they invented nuclear weapons. But if they didn't, and they managed to keep themselves together, yeah, that could be very frightening. And after all, wouldn't it take something of an aggressive species to want to explore the galaxy in the first place? Wouldn't a conservative, peaceful species be satisfied in just staying put in their own system? Kind of scary thoughts to think about. So in any event, Johnny Spacer again, we're anthropomorphizing extraterrestrial intelligence. We simply don't know if it's a threat. We should just listen in and watch for a long time. There is a chance that we could use gravity. I'm sorry, I keep having things pop up. Gravity lensing on the sun or a planet to visually investigate a planet that seems to have indicators of civilization. Yes, and as telescopes advance, we're going to have a greater and greater possibility of being able to do this and do it accurately. So in any event, we'll see how all of that works out. But nevertheless, it's a pretty good idea. Again, we very well may have already detected evidence of this in one of my videos recently. The one I did about alien life, I talked about a particular star, and I am sorry, I'm a bit scatterbrained today, but a star that has an immense presence of radioactives, including plutonium and other extremely advanced types of radioactives that generally can only be produced artificially in this star, and billions of tons of it that we've picked up. We're certain that it's there. And Carl Sagan, back in the 80s, said that something like this would be a clear technosignature for another civilization, a civilization that either chose to get rid of all of their radioactives because they didn't want the risk of nuclear war, or perhaps they're transmitting a message to other civilizations. Hey guys, we have a lot of nuclear weapons, don't mess with us. And if they're scared, what are they scared of? But regardless, this seems like a very, very clear technosignature, and yet it isn't. If you look, it's Treblinski's star, by the way, that finally jumped into my head. If you look that up at all, the very few references that you find to it, almost none. say anything about it being of extraterrestrial origin. When Carl Sagan said that this would be a very clear techno signature just a few decades ago, but not anymore. I mean, when are we going to accept something as being a clear indication of extraterrestrial civilizations? When are we finally going to accept it? When they're flying in Independence Day style and blasting our cities? I mean, really, what's it gonna take? It starts getting a little annoying after a while. I'm sorry, I'm ranting a bit, but I am the angry astronaut. I tend to do that an awful lot. So in any event, like I say, we've been getting a lot of comments from people who are not usually members of this particular forum, and they've been awesome. Really, really think that this has been cool, and we still have time, guys. I know we have a lot of other really important things going on, but if any of you are still hanging out, feel free to make some contributions. Juhid, we have somebody typing in. So in any event, oh, we have two people typing in. Thanks for hanging out, guys. I know we have some really important stuff going on in the world of manned spaceflight right now. What kind of life could the Venus atmosphere contain? Well, it would probably be microbial, but nevertheless, the evidence for Venusian life in those dark streaks, something that subsists off of ultraviolet radiation, that type of life has been postulated. And once again, the fact that the Venusian atmosphere is not carbon monoxide, but instead is carbon dioxide, that seems to be a bit of a giveaway. It should be carbon monoxide by now, with the intense bombardment of radiation and cosmic rays from its location and its proximity to the sun. But that's not the case, and that's not the only bit of evidence that we have for life existing in the atmosphere of Venus. And by the way, if 100 years from now we determine that all of these things are correct, if Europa does indeed have life, if Venus does indeed have life, if Mars has life, if it's that common, can we continue to presume that there's no extraterrestrial civilizations nearby? If it's that easy for life to take root, who knows? Life could be a commonplace thing in our solar system for all we know. 20 years ago, if you'd said that there was life in the Venusian atmosphere, people would have locked you up. But now it's looking very, very likely. Or at least, yes. The star system, you're just going to have to look it up because it's only known by a very extensive series of letters and numbers. I'm sorry about that, but that's the case. But it's barely been reported on. But there was, and you just look up disappearing stellar disk. It has scientists baffled. A star system in early development had a disk of matter, which is common for young stars, and that was observed a few decades ago very clearly, and then all of a sudden it vanished completely. There's no disk whatsoever left, and no explanation for this, aside from a black hole or something with incredible gravitational power that could have vacuumed up all of this matter, an entire solar system's worth of matter. But no sign of anything along those lines, no black holes, no, energy emissions from something along those lines. But there's a very clear explanation if we're talking about technosignatures, if we're talking about an alien species that needed a lot of matter for some sort of project, for some sort of megastructure. That's a very obvious explanation, and yet one that's barely even talked about. Any thoughts? We're getting a little off topic, but I'll make a quick comment. Any thoughts about the EM drive that was getting some attention a few years ago? I think the EM drive is smoke without a fire personally, but I could be wrong about that. But to make a real quick comment, just because it's a little bit off topic, marked, I do think that the EM drive is something that is becoming less and less likely the more we learn about it. But once again, who knows? I'm certainly not a complete expert on the subject. Juhid, while intelligent life might be rare, no way the microbiological life is. It makes no sense when looking at our own solar system. I agree completely, and it kind of goes in conjunction with what I just said. Life could be very common in our solar system. And if it is, that means that life is incredibly common everywhere. If it's common here, it's got to be common in most solar systems. Life finds a way. I tend to believe in that. ET vacuuming, says Juan Lawson. Yeah. I mean, aside from a black hole or something with incredible gravitational force, how the hell do you make an entire disk of matter that forms planets just disappear? You don't. And yet it's barely even been talked about in the media at all. If you look it up, you can find it, disappearing stellar disk or something along those lines. You'll find it eventually. But once again, it isn't talked about much at all. And to my knowledge, it hasn't been studied very much, aside from the fact that we really have no idea as to how all of that matter suddenly just disappeared. Aside from a pretty obvious reason, I think, which is somebody needed it for something. But in any event, I'm biased. I freely admit it. I am biased when it comes to this, but I don't think I'm the only one. I think the majority of the scientific community is biased the other way. Okay, alien zookeeper. If there is life on Mars, it could be potentially useful for living off the land. Yes, or could we potentially incorporate it into our colonists? It is actually, there's very strong evidence to suggest that if alien life exists on Mars, it could be useful. There are types of bacteria here on Earth that can metabolize perchlorates and turn it into oxygen. As a matter of fact, there has been a prototype of an emergency oxygen supply system that could be brought to Mars, and just the enzymes of the bacteria, not the bacteria themselves, you would just have to put a few kilograms of matter of regolith, Martian regolith, into a bag and have it produce an hour's worth of oxygen. So that being the case, and the fact that there's a lot more oxygen in the Martian atmosphere than we expected, to me, once again, 2 + 2 = 4, even on Mars. If that's the case, there's something there, metabolizing the perchlorates in the Martian soil and creating oxygen. So as a result, if we give this life a helping hand, as long as it's not dangerous to us, if we give it a helping hand and help it to reproduce at a higher rate, it could create huge amounts of oxygen for us. Perhaps even help with terraforming. Hard to say, but at least produce a lot of oxygen for our own purposes. So yeah, there's in that regard, at least, it could be used. Also, the very same kind of life, processing perchlorates, producing oxygen, could also help us make solid rocket fuel. A whole lot of it, given how much in the way of perchlorates there is on the Martian surface. So if there's Martian life, it could help us make solid rocket fuel, which could be quite useful. So yeah, I would say that there's actually, and of course I tend to be a little bit more Pollyanna about these things, but I like to think that whatever life there is on Mars, it's going to be more useful to us than it's going to be harmful, and that we're going to be able to find more ways of collaborating with it than we're going to find to destroy it, or that it's going to be able to destroy us. I would say instead it's going to be something that's going to be incredibly useful to us, and perhaps we useful to it as well. Okay, so let's see here. After I've made my little soapbox, let's see, where are we? Oh, we still got 20 minutes at least. And I'm going to add a few more minutes onto that simply because getting things set up again was such a pain. Once again, I apologize for that. Okay, Gunkeltron, one idea that stuck when he read Guns, Germs, and Steel is that civilization is dependent on other species than just the intelligent one running the civilization. Plants and animals are suitable for large-scale farming. Not all planets may be so blessed. That is true. Our presence could actually be more beneficial to Mars than harmful. And, every time it's shown up in the comments that, oh my God, if we discover life on Mars, the UN is going to keep us from landing there. I strongly disagree with that. I'm just going to come out and say I strongly disagree with that. Here's why. First of all, the UN does not tell the United States what to do, or Israel for that matter, ever, okay, ever. We do not follow what the UN has to say. We have veto powers in the UN Security Council. We can do whatever the hell we want. That's the first thing. And secondly, I believe that it's going to be very difficult, given the long-term survival abilities of Martian life, should it exist, for us to be able to do anything harmful to it unless we put in a lot of effort to do so. I think that national parks, preserve areas the same way that we preserve life here on Earth can be done on Mars. As a matter of fact, we may be able to simply coexist with these things and not have any problems, kind of like we do with squirrels in our own environment, or rats or mice. We might find them actually impossible to get rid of. So I don't think there's that much of a danger at all. And it's going to take a lot of evidence to convince me that our presence is going to be dangerous whatsoever to any life on Earth. And I do not believe that the UN or any conspiracy is going to be able to keep us from exploring Mars if we discover life there. That's just my opinion. And I could be wrong, but I do believe that we will be able to explore Mars in the flesh, whether we find life there or not. That's just my opinion. Okay. Looking forward for the MOXIE experiment results on the Perseverance mission. And yes, I'm very glad that we made that window as well. And once again, Juan Lawson is talking once again about organic tests, that sort of thing. Our beginning efforts to try to locate life. By the way, we also have a camera on the Perseverance that's capable of examining pieces of matter as small as a grain of salt. So if there are large colonies of fairly sizable bacteria, say a micron in diameter, we could probably observe that directly with that camera if we look in the right places. Once again, it would be sheer luck, and we have to be looking aggressively in the right places. But still, it is possible. And I'm crossing my fingers, and I'm hoping that Martian life is as common as I think it is, and that we're going to find it far more quickly than we think we're going to. And it's not going to require a sample retrieval in order to prove the existence of life in 2021. My fingers are crossed on this one. But nevertheless, we will see what develops. Okay. Excuse me. All right. We have another comment. Bear with me for just a second here. I'll tell you, this is annoying as all get out. No, this appears to be the last one, is the MOXIE experiment. Okay, so further comments. We still have some time to go, and I know that folks are probably still keeping up with what's going on. So in any event, bear with me here. Wouldn't you know it? You hit the wrong button and anything can happen. I'm getting back to questions and answers. I apologize, guys. Okay, Juan Lawson is making another comment. Finally got it back. Discord has been very good to me for a long time on this whole thing, but today it's been sabotaging the heck out of me. So in any event, sorry about that, guys. Okay, just waiting for next comment in the meantime. So I'd actually like for those who are currently present, it seems to be pretty, it seems to be pretty conclusive, but I'd like to, here we go. Could it turn out that Titan may turn out life that relies on methane? Yeah, I've actually talked a little bit about that, but you may not have been here for that. Methanogenic life, there was a proposal put together in 2005 indicating that if there was life that relied on methane, methane-based process or methanogenic life, something that breathed hydrogen, that there would be an effect on the presence of acetylene and also the presence of hydrogen in Titan's atmosphere at the surface level. And in 2010, that was all confirmed to be correct. All of that was confirmed to be accurate and exactly as predicted if there was methanogenic life on Titan. And yet, instead of getting really excited and saying, holy crap, we may have discovered methanogenic life, something totally different than our life here, instead it was said that it's probably either human error or some sort of natural process that we're not familiar with instead of something like methanogenic life. That was the conclusion that has generally been arrived at. Once again, until we actually go to Titan, until we are and put something under a microscope, no one's going to be convinced until we have a paradigm shift in the way that we look at these things. It's frustrating as all get out. There's a lot of reasons to go to Titan. Titan has many, many fascinating things that we should be exploring, but once again, NASA only has so much money. SpaceX, only so many things they can do as well because they're focused on Mars. So when are we going to get to Titan? Who knows? Is there a very compelling reason to go to Titan? Yeah, absolutely. It's unlike any other planet or moon in the solar system by far. It's a moon that we could colonize. And in many ways, it's actually a more attractive moon to colonize than Mars is. Because of the presence of an atmosphere. If you were to cut your spacesuit on Titan, you wouldn't die swiftly the way you would on Mars because of the pressure issues. You'd have a much greater chance of surviving that. So in any event, is there life on Titan? I'd say there's a strong possibility for it. There are predictions made, and if there's methanogenic life, this is what we can expect. And guess what? Everything turned up exactly as predicted in 2010, and nothing has happened since then. So in any event, and imagine my surprise, right? Imagine my shock. So in any event, we have a couple of folks who are typing. So it's been a great conversation, by the way. I was a little concerned, thinking that perhaps folks wouldn't be as interested in this particular topic, but I'm glad that you are. Yes, easy to make the rocket fuel for a return journey. Yes, in situ. In situ. Rocket fuel to be manufactured. Does it really make sense, asked Juhid, that Oumuamua was an alien ship? Well, it depends on how you look at it in terms of, was it an alien ship that was damaged or ancient? I would say that is the most likely scenario, and here's why. Oumuamua, if it was an asteroid, it should not have been accelerated by the tiny amount of photons that struck it as far out as it was from the sun, and it experienced its acceleration. Just all of a sudden, it had this unexplained acceleration, which Dr. Loeb explained as being the results of a light sail. And then he was immediately attacked online by peers and such for even daring to come up with such a postulation. Once again, just it doesn't seem very scientific to me at all, especially since this guy isn't a crackpot and a highly respected scientist. So in any event, it's not traveling fast enough to be a realistic alien ship, at least something that would carry a crew or anything along those lines. But is it something that could possibly be a probe? Yes, there's a lot to indicate that. It happened to pass right through the Goldilocks zone of our solar system. Why? Why did it do that? That's a big coincidence. It happened to be accelerated for reasons, cometary outgassing cannot be the explanation that it experienced this sudden amount of acceleration, because if it was a comet, we would have seen it long before we detected it when it was close to the sun and giving off a huge cometary tail. And so the whole notion that's being put forward now that somehow it had this ice that magically escaped being evaporated while it was really close to the sun, but instead, suddenly outgassed when it was a huge distance from the sun, seems utterly absurd to me. Seems far more likely that we're talking about a light sail. Also, its speed is extremely suspicious. Its speed is in such a way, in terms of its relative speed to the rotation of the galaxy, it's almost as if it was designed for the galaxy to run into it, for the rotation of the galaxy to encounter it, as a probe would, exploring one stellar system after another, and doing so in a very subtle fashion, to where it wouldn't be easily detected. And by the way, we didn't even detect it until it was way past our orbit. Or it could also be a damaged ship or something along those lines with a light sail that isn't fully operational anymore. Who knows? It's hard to say, but I would say that all of those scenarios are far more likely than all of a sudden we've got this mysterious interstellar object that's more reflective than anything we've ever detected, shaped in a manner that's different than anything else that we've ever seen in the solar system, accelerated for reasons that we can't begin to explain. Come on, really? And yet it's looked upon as being almost negligible possibility of it being extraterrestrial in origin. To me, that's just scientific bias, plain and simple. But once again, I tend to be biased as well. Alien zookeeper. Could potential Martian life forms be useful for colonization? I talked about that briefly, alien zookeeper. Sorry about that. Looks like you missed it. But in any event, yes, it could. Really briefly, any Martian life that's capable of making use of perchlorates and producing oxygen as a byproduct, like many types of, well, not many, there are a few types of bacteria here on Earth that are capable of doing that. If Martian life can do that, which would be a good explanation for the presence of oxygen in its atmosphere, then yes, it could be very useful to produce oxygen for us and to also produce oxygen for solid rocket fuel. So yes, I would say life is more likely to be useful to us than not. Okay, Gunkeltron, a lot of fascinating questions about the possibilities of life in the universe that we may never get answers to. Oumuamua, Tabby Star. In the end, we may only be able to take deGrasse Tyson's advice to learn to love the questions themselves. Yeah, that is one way to look at it, and a legitimate way. But, I tend to think that I just think that it's a more enlightened way of looking at things if we just simply admit what is obvious, that there is other life, that, you know, maybe we haven't been able to drag it into a laboratory and put it under a microscope, but we've seen so much evidence of its existence that somewhere one of these, at least one of these phenomena have been created by extraterrestrial activity. Tabby star is another example. Oumuamua, you know, in the future, we could catch up to that. You know, if we made a significant effort and had and used an alternative form of propulsion, we could catch a Muamua and take a good look at it. We won't. We're not going to invest the effort in tracking down a Muamua, but we could. We could do it. And who knows, maybe at some point, way, way in the future, we absolutely will. And yeah, the debate obviously is going to continue probably for a very long time. Hopefully, not for very long when it comes to simple alien life. I'm really hoping that we get lucky with perseverance and stumble across something that we cannot dismiss. Okay, Juan Lawson is beginning to type. Once again, thank you very much for everybody's participation. We still have a few minutes left to go and still have people watching, which is, I find to be amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I think that that's fantastic. I think that if we learn to accept that there is intelligent life, then we won't need two wow signals to prove it. Yes, and actually that's something else that I forgot to bring up. Actually, we took another reading of additional signals that came in close to the hydrogen line, and we picked up the signal from the same area, once weaker and once stronger, again close to the hydrogen line, and we picked it up more than once. The Russians did, actually. Look that one up. Call it Russian wow signal, but feel free to look that up. And we picked up that signal as well. And yet still we haven't accepted it, in spite of the fact that that kind of seems like a repetition of a signal to me. And yet, you know, it's still not enough. Are we ever going to have enough? And are we just going to endlessly debate this? That's a hard one. That's a difficult one to answer, until something actually chooses to come and visit us and make itself extremely obvious to us. We may be debating this matter forever, and perhaps we do need to love the questions themselves. Hard one to say. Okay, so we still have a few minutes. Once again, guys, thank you so much for hanging out for as long as you did in spite of the technical issues. This has been a great conversation, and we've had a good audience. I'm impressed. So thank you very much for that. We have time left for a couple more if anybody else wants to make a comment. I know that we have what's going, you know, the splashdown with Crew Dragon and everything along those lines. So Juhid is making can't come up with much. Okay, well, in any event, I encourage all of you, just look up tangible evidence for extraterrestrial life. Just Google that someday and look at all of the information that pops up, and you may be really shocked. Also, I strongly recommend that you check out a channel, John Michael Gaudier, who he specializes in this. He doesn't believe as strongly in the existence of extraterrestrial life as I do, but nevertheless, he brings up a lot of this stuff. Have a look at that as well. Once again, if you want to participate in this, I'm going to put this, it's in the description of most of my recent videos, but I'll put this in as well. Thank you all very much for showing up and for participating in this unconventional discussion. It's been fantastic for all of you to being around. Once again, this is going to be recorded and put out there for all of you that missed anything. Thank you. Oh, we got one more thing typing, another contribution being typed in. So I will, actually two more people. So these are the last two. So here we go, here we go, here we go. Yes, Event Horizon. John Michael Gaudier has two channels, actually. One, Event Horizon, where he interviews people, and then a main channel where he talks about these topics, including Tabby Star, including, in fact, this is what inspired a lot of this stuff for me, was his channel. So you're welcome, Juhid. You're welcome. We'll go with John Lawson's what he's typing in, and then we shall be done. So I am just waiting here. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Juan. I appreciate it very much. And yes, thank you for being a newbie. And guys, I encourage all of you to be an active part of this or being part of the audience either way. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much. The best to all of you and the best to the folks on the Crew Dragon. And until next time, to all of you, stay angry about space.